And hijabi students at Al-Zahra University in Tehran have been chanting, "I am a free woman," meaning men are immoral, not women, as part of an ongoing protest. Video obtained locally shows the students chanting their protest to mark the 40-day anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old who died September 16 while in the custody of Iran's morality police, who had detained her due to her inappropriate attire. The location of the video was verified by the building characteristics. Protests have taken place in a number of universities in Iran's capital, elsewhere in the country, and also demonstrations around the world. VOA's Edward Yerinian is in Cairo. He's been watching the story, and he joins me now. Thank you, Edward, for joining me. 40 whole days, talking about, the days of protest. How would you describe it, seeing that it's not just been in Iran alone, but also other countries across the world?
Well, Millicent, it looks a lot like the 2009 protests after the election, where the Green movement was trying to get people out in the streets. Mostly university students so far, but it does look like it's gaining a little bit of steam after 40 days.
And I believe that after that, we heard that internet restrictions were imposed for security reasons, protests continuing there as well. But tell us a bit more, the history behind the morality police in Iran.
Well, the morality police actually physically started in the 1990s, so it doesn't go back to the revolution in 1979. But the man who's behind the revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, was the person who issued the demand that women veil themselves. And there was a lot of pressure on women to wear the veil from those in the street. So it was in the 80s as much a mandatory thing as it was after that, even though the morality police actually came into existence in the 90s, early 90s.
And to think that all this is happening because of a terrible scenario. Mahsa Amini, her family, in interviews with local media, have rejected authorities' claims that their daughter suffered from pre-existing conditions, saying that she may have been beaten. What have investigations turned up?
Well, the Iranian government is insisting that she had a pre-existing condition. I mean, I've reported on many things from Iran where the government insists on something and it's not necessarily true. But then a lot of stories that come out of Western media aren't necessarily true. And I think as journalists, we're not very critical of what's going on that we are reporting very, very often. Things that, for instance, a lot of these protests are in the fringe areas of Iran, from the Kurds, from the Balukis. And this is where the major story has been reported. And it doesn't mean that every Iranian town and city is overflowing with protesters. I mean, there are a lot of protesters. The university students are protesting a lot, but it isn't quite up to that level where everyone is out in the streets, the impression you might get if you were watching Western media.
And when you say that, authorities have defended the actions, even though they've also denounced the riots, but then they've called it anti-revolutionary. They've also said that these are elements guided by foreign powers, that they're the ones driving the movement.
Well, there is certainly some truth to that. I mean, we've seen efforts coming from Western governments to put pressure on Iran, probably at one point because the nuclear negotiations fell apart, and the Iranian people are responding to a certain degree. I mean, you could argue either way, that the Iranians were originally the ones who started this, and obviously you couldn't fabricate the killing of a student, a young woman who wasn't wearing the veil. That obviously happened, so there is no question about that. But as to putting pressure from the media, the Western media especially, and these protests in the Western capitals, yes, I think pressure is being put on the Iranian government from the West, which is perhaps a good thing. I don't want to discount that. But nevertheless, the West does play a role in some of these protests.
Talking about the West, the United States, the European Union, human rights organizations, they've condemned the use of violence against protesters. We understand the U.S. imposed sanctions on the morality police for alleged abuses, violence against women. But on the other hand, it's not all from the international community. There've also been that question of the role Iran is playing with the war in Ukraine, the alleged use of the kamikaze drone, something Iran has denied. What do you see the relationship between Iran and the West going?
Well, I think Iran is an ally of Russia, and Russia has supported Iran's position in Syria and Iraq to a certain extent. And so Iran is technically obligated in some ways to support Russia. I don't know to what extent they were supporting them other than these drones. I believe that's about the only thing. And a lot of these drones the technology came from the U.S. because the Iranians captured a drone a few years ago, and they got the Chinese to backtrack the technology. And it is originally U.S. technology. And I don't know to what degree the U.S. Was culpable in letting that technology slip into Iranian hands. I think the plane crashed in Iran, at least that was a report at the time. So Iran has this technology because it came from the U.S., basically.
Edward, thank you. We continue to watch the developments. We've been speaking to VOA's Edward Uranian in Cairo, Egypt.
My pleasure, Millicent.
Let's go over to British politics. Britain's newly appointed cabinet under new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak convened for the first time at number 10 Downing Street this morning, a day after he took power with a promise to fix his predecessor's mistakes and stabilise the economy. At the top of Sunak's agenda will be preparation for a fiscal statement at the end of the month, keenly anticipated by financial markets, but which the Times newspaper reported could be pushed back by a few days. Mr. Sunak chose not to bring in a new finance minister, keeping Jeremy Hunt in the role, but did appoint a cabinet with a mix of views from across the Conservative Party's political factions. His decision-making immediately came in for criticism from the opposition Labour Party, which focused on the reinstating of lawmaker Suella Braverman. Meanwhile, Britain has postponed the announcement of a plan to repair the country's public finances to the 17th of November for it to reflect the most accurate possible economic forecast. The finance minister, Jeremy Hunt, said economic stability is their #1 priority. Mr. Hunt, who was reappointed finance minister by new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, said the fiscal plan would now be a full autumn statement that will show debt falling over the medium term.
Our #1 priority is economic stability and restoring confidence that the United Kingdom is a country that pays its way. And for that reason, the medium-term fiscal plan is extremely important. And I want to confirm that it will demonstrate debt falling over the medium term, which is very important for people to understand. But it's also extremely important that that statement is based on the most accurate possible economic forecasts and forecasts of public finances. And for that reason, the Prime Minister and I have decided that it is prudent to make that statement on the 17th of November, when it will be upgraded to a full autumn statement. And I've discussed this last night with the Governor of the Bank of England. He understands the reasons for doing that, and I'll continue to work very closely with him. Well, there has been a lot of market turbulence, even in the last 48 hours. And the question is how you deal with that turbulence to make sure that the very, very important and very difficult decisions that I and the Prime Minister have to make are the right ones, decisions that stand the test of time and do the right thing for people at home who are worried about their mortgages, their jobs, the cost of living, the bills and so on. And for that reason, accuracy in the forecasts, both around public finances and economic growth, is very important, and that's why this is the right decision and a prudent decision. Well, I think I have demonstrated in the short time that I've been Chancellor that I'm willing to take decisions very quickly, and I'm willing to make choices that are politically embarrassing if they're the right thing to do for the country, if they're in the national interest. Now we have a new Prime Minister and the prospect of much longer term stability for the economy in the country. And in that context, a short 2.5-week delay is the best way we will make sure that it is the right decisions we take. Well, she apologised for her mistakes. She has been fully accountable for those mistakes. She stepped down as Home Secretary. But from the point of view of people at home who want stability in the economy, they also need to see a united Conservative Party, and that's why the Prime Minister has put together a cabinet of all the talents.
Let's take you to the moment in what some would call the lion's den. Rishi Sunak faced opposition lawmakers in Parliament today for his first Prime Minister's question session a day after taking office. After being congratulated by opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer on becoming Britain's first ever British Asian Prime Minister, Mr Sunak faced questions about his decision to reappoint Suella Braverman as Interior Minister. Mr Starmer suggested that Mr Sunak had reappointed her to secure support for his leadership bid, which he eventually won uncontested on Monday, among other things. Take a listen.
Was his Home Secretary right to resign last week for a breach of security?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr Speaker, can I thank the right honourable gentleman for his kind and indeed generous welcome to the dispatch box. I look forward to Prime Minister's question time with him, and I know that we will have, no doubt, robust exchanges, but I hope that they can also be serious and grown up. So I look forward to it. Well, he asked about the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary made an error of judgment, but she recognised that. She raised the matter and she accepted her mistake. And that's why I was delighted to welcome back into a united cabinet that brings experience and stability to the heart of government.
We can all see what's happened here. He's so weak, he's done a grubby deal, trading national security because he was scared to lose another leadership election. There's a new Tory at the top, but as always with them, party first, country second. Yesterday, on the steps of Downing Street, he also admitted what the whole country knows. The Tories have crashed the economy, and now somebody has to pay for their mess. I say it shouldn't be working people who've been hammered time and again by this lot, but those with the broadest shoulders must step up. Does he agree?
No. Well, Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman talked about... my record is clear. When times are difficult in this country, I will always protect the most vulnerable. That is the values of our compassionate party. We did it in COVID and we will do that again.
Mr Speaker, he says he'll protect the most vulnerable. Let's test that. The government currently allows...
Well, it's away from the British politics when we return after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back to issues of the economy here in Nigeria. If you still have the 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira notes in your custody, well, time is ticking on its usage for any transaction, as the Central Bank of Nigeria today broke the news that it will redesign those denomination of the naira and reissue new ones effective the 15th of December. The disclosure was made by the governor of the Apex Bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, during a special media briefing in Abuja. He explains that following the new development, there will be no more bank charges for deposit as the CBN mops up liquidity.
The integrity of a local legal tender, the efficiency of its supply, as well as its efficacy in the conduct of monetary policy are some of the hallmarks of a great central bank. In recent times, however, currency management has faced several daunting challenges that have continued to escalate in scale and sophistication, with attendant and unintended consequences for the integrity of both the CBN and the country at large. Mandate as enshrined in Section 2B of the CBN Act of 2007 to ensure a strong and effective legal tender. It is therefore no longer tenable to continue with business as usual, especially given the continually evolving circumstances that could impeach the optimal performance of our Naira. Furthermore, we believe that the redesign of the currency will help deepen our drive to entrench cashless economy, as it will be complemented by increased minting of our e-Naira. This will further rein in the currency outside the banking system into the banking system, thereby making monetary policy more efficacious.
And to the United States, we're 2 weeks ahead of when millions of Americans will head to the polls to take part in the midterm elections. Voters in Chicago area are sounding off about what they consider the nation's #1 issue, and that is inflation. For Chrissy Zeffield, he is in between jobs, sleeping on a twin-size air mattress in her best friend's basement after losing the house she was renting and spending weeks sleeping in her car. She says her financial struggles have made spending time with her 11-year-old twin sons nearly impossible, as she weighs whether to save what little money she has or spend it on gas to pick her boys up from their father's house. She considers herself a conservative, believes that the Biden administration is to blame for the rising inflation. Other voters fear what a Republican majority in Congress could mean.
My cell phone is disconnected because I can't pay the bill. I mean, it's just the everyday necessities that people take for granted. You can't afford them anymore. And when you're stuck with nothing, what do? You know? Thankfully, they've, helped take me in, where I at least have a roof over my head. But being 38 years old, I never would have expected myself to be in this kind of a position. This is my dog, Charlie. So this is our space right here. It's my air mattress that I purchased roughly about a month ago. Got it for a steal on Amazon for about 40 bucks. My clothes, that's about all I've got. Everything else has been sold from storage. I have my 2 suitcases right there. That is it. That's my property, other than my dog and blankets and pillows. So, it's been a struggle.
Well, there's a lot of struggles going on now in this country with the food. Just about everything in general. It's because of the way they say we're not in inflation, but it's economically it's hurting us. Whether you call it whatever you want to name it, it's hurting all of us. Trying to make it every day, every week, every month. So I thank God that I put everything in God's hands, because I know it's out of my control. So I just hope that things start changing. This upcoming election. There's nothing wrong with the Republicans, but they don't seem to be wanting to give up anything. They just seem to want to keep it off for themselves. I mean, not for themselves, but to limit us and what we need, And I can never understand that. And with the Democrats, they're very giving to the minorities, to people in general. The Republicans the Republicans are all multi-millionaires in the Senate. And if they win the Senate over again, or Congress, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows?
No, it's kind of hard, but we make do with it. It's outrageous on all the prices, but you get what you get. Get what you get. You got to maintain and make do. And my grandbaby was happy for her little pair of shoes. And she's on the phone with her mother now saying, "Look what I got, Mommy, look what I got." So all of this does account. It helps. It helps a lot.
It's a similar scenario in Israel, as Israelis are fed up with soaring prices as they, with the country's seemingly never-ending elections in the November 1 ballot, a fifth in less than 4 years. Steep living costs exacerbated by record inflation are top priority for voters. Living costs also outweigh issues like the conflict with the Palestinians, voter surveys show. Yet, in a turbulent political system, it is attitudes towards the polarizing former premier, Benjamin Netanyahu, that sway voting patterns. A plus seemingly eternal election cycle means sweeping economic reforms are near impossible. The country's repeated ballots have seen only one state budget passed since 2019, hampering the kind of long-term planning that is needed to pass reforms to cut costs. And Israel's President Isaac Herzog met with U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi in Washington. Herzog said Iran was an enormous challenge and thanks the United States for its support of Israel. Ms. Pelosi also hailed the upcoming 75th anniversary celebration of the founding of the State of Israel. During talks, both Herzog and U.S. officials are expected to discuss a variety of issues, ranging from Iran reportedly providing Russia with drones and violence in the West Bank, where more than 100 Palestinians have been killed this year.
Thank you for being here to join me in welcoming the very distinguished President of Israel, President Herzog, to the Capitol once again. In the next few months, we will observe the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel. 75th anniversary. That will happen in the spring, but we're already getting ready for it. We take great pride that our President, President Truman, in a matter of minutes, recognized the State of Israel. And since that time, we've had a strong bond based on shared values.
We were honored to host you in the President's home in Jerusalem. And of course, we will always cherish, no doubt, Iran is an enormous challenge, and we greatly appreciate the United States' support. In the face of those who would jeopardize our security and destabilize our world, we must stand firm, hand in hand. We greatly appreciate the long-standing commitment of Speaker Pelosi and leaders of both parties and both chambers that the United States will always stand by Israel in every situation and against every threat. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. I bring shalom and greetings from Jerusalem.
And the United States, Japan and South Korea have warned that an unparalleled scale of response would be warranted if North Korea conducts a 7th nuclear bomb test. South Korean First Vice Foreign Minister Cho Hyun-dong says, quote, "We agreed that an unparalleled scale response would be necessary if they push ahead with that test." He was speaking alongside his Japanese and U.S. counterparts, Vice Foreign Minister Takeo Mori and Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. To health now, where the European Union's drug regulator has warned of a new wave of COVID-19 infections and called on EU citizens to get vaccinated or revaccinated now. He added the Omicron subvariant BQ.1 had been detected in 5 of the 27 members of the EU and warned it had an increased ability to dodge immunity. The EMA's head of health threats and vaccine strategy says the EU agency saw a steep decline of monkeypox cases and an apparent containment of the outbreak in Europe. And that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Walker. Bye for now.